Mulholland, on the right side of the Pennines, is a place known by locals as God's own county, by the rest of the world as Yorkshire, and by me as home. Hi, I'm Heather, a born and bred Yorkshire lass. I spent most of my life in what I consider to be the best region of the UK, until I moved to Liverpool for university at 18. At 20, I ventured even further from home, choosing to study abroad in the USA. While there, I caught the infamous disease known as the travel bug. Living abroad for a year ignited a passion for adventure and a desire to see as much of the world as I possibly can. And now I'm about to graduate from university with not much of a plan beyond writing things and travelling. However, despite my eagerness to escape the UK, I've always felt a deep sense of pride in being from Yorkshire, so much so that I even named my travel blog Travels of a Yorkshire Lass. So, before jetting off on whatever journeys my future holds, I decided to go on a little adventure through my home county. Leeds is the largest city in Yorkshire, and it's also where I was born. I was raised in a village about 20 minutes away from the busy city centre. Growing up, going into Leeds for shopping trips was one of the most exciting ways to spend the day. There's a diverse range of shops, from high-end designers in the modern Victoria Gate to the vintage quirkiness of the Corn Exchange. But the most popular place to shop is Trinity Shopping Centre. I remember when it first opened in 2013, it felt like something completely new and unusual, which added this whole new level of excitement about going into Leeds. A decade later, it still feels fresh and new. Maybe it's the maze-like layout or the cool architecture. Maybe it's the fact that new shops are always being opened and it's always filled with customers. Or maybe it's the range of restaurants enticing hungry shoppers to take a break and relax. Although there are loads of restaurants on the top floor of the shopping centre, my personal favourite spot to eat is Trinity Kitchen. It's designed like a food hall with a variety of different stalls offering a diverse range of fast food. From handmade pizzas to American-style burgers, spicy curries to Vietnamese street food, there's something to satisfy every craving. Despite all the choices, there's only one thing I ever get: a burrito. When I was studying abroad in America, there was a fast food chain called Chipotle, which was really similar to the burrito place in Trinity Kitchen. You build your own burrito, choose your own toppings, that kind of thing. While I was over there, Chipotle became my go-to place to eat. And to be honest, I probably ate there a little bit too much. But I think the reason that I liked it so much was because it reminded me of home. Each mouthful of those mediocre burritos tasted like trips to Leeds, and those little reminders are so important when you're so far away from home. Now that I'm back, the burritos in Leeds remind me of my travels in America, so I guess they'll always just be connected to a memory for me. However, since I've returned from the US, it's been quite sad to see how much Leeds has changed. Although Trinity remains a vibrant part of the city, outside the shopping centre is a different story. What used to be one of the main shopping streets in Leeds is now almost totally boarded up. There are more closed shutters than open stores, more to let signs than shop names. What once was the centre of a bustling city now seems more like a ghost town, haunted by shops that no longer exist and slowly being demolished by the rise of online shopping. But it's not all bad news. Although so many businesses have sadly had to close, there's one that's been given a second chance at life. In August 2022, the roof at the Kitty Cafe collapsed. Luckily, none of the cats were harmed, but the cost of repairs was going to be steep. With all the lost business during the pandemic and the strain of the current cost of living crisis, the cafe took to social media to share their fears that this would be the end for Leeds' beloved cat cafe. The announcement broke my heart, and it seems I wasn't the only one who felt that way. Many members of the community offered donations to save this cute and quirky establishment, and thankfully it managed to reopen in December 2022. So now you can enjoy the company of cats while drinking a cuppa once again. The fact that the Kitty Cafe was able to reopen in a time of such uncertainty gives me a little bit of hope for the future. Although times are changing and high streets are suffering, what happened with the Kitty Cafe proves that people will fight to keep the places that bring them joy. Or maybe it just means that people really like cats. Although Leeds' future may be uncertain, its past is something that will always be relevant. There are many historical landmarks in Leeds, such as Kirkstall Abbey and Oakwell Hall, but the one that stands apart to me is Temple Newsam, a Tudor mansion surrounded by tranquil gardens. I first went to Temple Newsam on a school trip, and there's only one thing I remember about that day. I forgot my lunch. Despite the fact that I took a packed lunch to school every single day, on the day of this trip I arrived at school to discover my lunchbox was not in my bag. And this was a problem because there wasn't going to be an opportunity to get lunch at all on this trip. So my head teacher ended up giving me his lunch to take with me instead. I remember eating his strange sandwich and pretending that it was nice in one of the many rooms of the house while my classmates told ghost stories about the former owners. I revisited the house a few days ago with my sister, and both of us were pretty surprised to discover she remembered loads of facts about the history of the house from her own school trip there. However, Temple Newsam is more than just a historical landmark. Today it's used as a venue for a range of exciting events. The event that I remember the most that was held at Temple Newsam was Party in the Park. This was a free concert that was hosted by Radio Air every summer. The tickets were given out by random selection, so I used to force every member of my family to apply for them in the hopes of winning at least some. There was always a range of artists performing, and despite it being a free concert, some of those artists were actually pretty famous, including Little Mix and One Direction. I managed to go to quite a few of the concerts, but the first one that I went to was the most memorable. This was where I was first introduced to a band called The Wanted. They were very new at the time and they only performed one song, but they went on to become my favourite band and biggest obsession when I was about 10 years old. It's kind of cringy now when I think about how obsessed I was with that band, but that obsession was such a big part of my identity when I was a kid, and all of that started here at Temple Newsam. York is a city filled with history. From the moment you step out of the train station, you'll be met with the beautiful city walls, and a short walk will give you stunning views of York Minster. You can explore the ruins of an abbey at York Museum Gardens, have a drink in the birthplace of Guy Fawkes, and climb to the top of Clifford's Tower. In my opinion, one of the most interesting places to visit is the Shambles, an extremely narrow shopping street made up of a cobblestone road and medieval buildings. The Shambles is also believed to have been the inspiration for the design of Diagon Alley in the Harry Potter movies, and ironically, these days it's mainly filled with shops selling Harry Potter merchandise. Not that I'm complaining about that. In addition to the appearance of York making you feel like you've travelled back in time, there's a range of museums that will also transport you through history. There's the Vikings at the Jorvik Centre, the Victorians at York Castle Museum, and the Georgians at Fairfax House. I visited all three of them over the years, either on school trips or on days out with family members, and all of them are extremely interesting and show the amazing range of history that has made York into the city it is today. For me, every trip to York has been different. Sometimes I'd visit one of the museums, other times I'd walk along the river, other times I'd go shopping in the cute vintage shops, and other times I'd wander down old alleyways to discover some beautiful buildings such as Merchants Hall. However, there's one thing that I always do when I'm in York, and that's visit Rustique. Rustique is a French restaurant that my parents stumbled on by accident one time, and now it has become my favourite restaurant ever. There have been times when I've travelled from Leeds to York just to eat at Rustique. Their starters and main courses are always delicious, but the main reason I'm so obsessed with this place is their creme brulee. Believe me when I tell you, this is the best creme brulee you'll ever eat. Seriously, I've tried it in so many other restaurants and none of them even come close to the one in Rustique. I had my first taste of it there 10 years ago and I'm still just as obsessed with it today. It's definitely worth making the trip to York just to try Rustique's creme brulee. But if French food's not your thing and you want to try something a little more local, York is filled with places serving Yorkshire delicacies. There's the Yorkshire Roast Company, which puts a modern twist on the classic Yorkshire pudding by transforming it into a wrap. Or for something a little sweeter, there's Betty's Tea Rooms with the iconic Fat Rascals. A Fat Rascal is a bit like a scone, except massive and even more delicious. I first tried one when I was in high school and we made them in food tech, and it's probably the only thing I made in that class that I can actually remember. Unfortunately, there's always a massive queue to get into the actual tea rooms, but there is a shop next door that sells Fat Rascals that you can get to take away to get instead to avoid the wait. I actually only tried a Betty's Fat Rascal for the first time the other day, but you best believe none of my trips to York are ever going to be complete without one again. Scarborough was Yorkshire's first seaside resort, and it was also the first seaside I ever visited, and it clearly made an impression because for most of my childhood I refused to go to any other beach. I actually used to start crying in the car if my dad told me that he was taking me to Bridlington instead of Scarborough. That's how obsessed I was with Scarborough as a child, and I'm still just as obsessed with it today. I can't really explain what it is about Scarborough that I love so much. When I was in America, I visited some incredible beaches, including Santa Monica in California, Cannon Beach in Oregon, and even Waikiki Beach in Hawaii, but for me, Scarborough tops all of them. People think that I'm either crazy or joking or being sarcastic when I say that, but I'm not. It's true. I absolutely love Scarborough. To put it simply, it's my happy place. One of the reasons that I love going to Scarborough so much is because I have an obsession with paddling, and in my opinion, Scarborough is the perfect place to do just that, even when the sea is freezing cold. On my most recent trip, the sea was so cold that my feet actually went completely numb, but that did not stop me from paddling the length of South Bay and back. There's just something so soothing about walking along that beach, surrounded by the swooshing soundtrack of the waves, the smell of the sea air, and the smooth texture of the wet sand. It just puts me so at peace. However, South Bay in Scarborough is good for more than just paddling, because apparently there are people out there that are not interested in doing that. There's a range of amusements such as Olympia Leisure, or Oompa Loompa Leisure as my sister likes to call it. There's also a fairground with cool rides for all you adrenaline junkies like me, although I would advise caution in that fairground, because the last time I went on a ride there I was 100% convinced that I was going to fall out of it. Didn't feel safe at all. There's also some amazing food that you have to try when you're in Scarborough. My personal favourite thing to eat in Scarborough, well actually my favourite thing to eat ever, is the prawns from one of the seafood stalls next to the beach. They taste so fresh and juicy and better than any prawns you'll eat anywhere else. Then there's also the hot, freshly made donuts you can get from the tea kiosk, which are sweet and sugary and delicious. And of course, no trip to the seaside would be complete without an ice cream. Scarborough is actually famous for an ice cream called the Lemon Top, which is a vanilla ice cream topped with a bright yellow lemon soft serve. However, personally, I think that the lemon twists that you can get from the Harbour Bar taste much nicer than the lemon tops. There's just a nicer balance of the tangy lemon with the sweet vanilla. And unpopular opinion, but I just think that they are the superior ice cream to get when you're in Scarborough. However, you do have to be very careful if you're going to eat on Scarborough Beach. The seagulls at Scarborough are lethal. I've had hot dogs and donuts swiped right from my hand by pesky seagulls, and on my most recent trip a seagull actually landed on my head to try and steal my donut. Luckily I managed to save the donut, but you really do have to keep your wits about you if you're going to eat anywhere outdoors in Scarborough. So if you'd rather eat somewhere that you're going to be safe from the pesky seagulls, I recommend the Golden Grids, a restaurant by the seafront that serves some delicious fish dishes. In my opinion, the fish chowder is the best thing on the menu. It's absolutely perfect for warming you up after a long paddle. After you've eaten your fill at South Bay, it's time to head around to North Bay. Most people tend to stay at South Bay as that's where all the main amusements and restaurants are, and it's closer to the town centre and the train station, but North Bay is not to be missed. The walk around Marine Drive is really scenic, and there are plaques containing interesting facts about Scarborough's history along the way, making the journey to North Bay really enjoyable. Alternatively, if you don't fancy a long walk, you can get an open-top bus instead. The beach at North Bay is usually a little quieter than at South Bay, but it's no less beautiful. It's got colourful huts running along the side, and the sand almost seems to sparkle when the sun shines on it. When you've had enough of the beach, nearby is the peaceful P-Zone Park, which is perfect for a calm stroll, or you can even go on a dragon-shaped pedalo, which I think is really cool. From there, you can also walk up to Scarborough Castle, and even visit the grave of Anne Bronte before heading back down to South Bay. I realised a few days ago that I've been to Scarborough every year of my life. Even the year that I spent in America, I booked a trip to Scarborough less than 24 hours after I got back to the UK. Each of my trips there have been slightly different, but the happiness that I feel in that place is always the same. As I travelled back to Liverpool for my final few weeks at university, I realised that I've never really felt sad about leaving Yorkshire, and that's because I know I'll always go back at some point. I don't know what the future will bring, where I will travel to or end up living after I leave university, but I do know that no matter how far I go, I'll always be drawn back to Yorkshire. These places and the experience I've had there have made me the person I am today. I guess it really is true that you can take the girl out of Yorkshire, but you can't take Yorkshire out of the girl.